Yeah.
today you had made an observation about the pro-Palestinian movement and transphobia.
Yeah.
That I found curious. So I wanted to give you a chance, first of all, to state your position so that.
Well, I think it was more of a question, because when I talked to you, Mark, in June or July or whenever it was, Mark, yeah, you said something to me I thought was really interesting, because I was saying, like, if you look at the history of the civil rights movement, Jewish people have been there. I grew up in Mississippi, and the Mississippi burning murder, that was one Black person and two Jewish people that were down in Mississippi registering, Black people to vote, trying to take care of that. There's a rich history of that in my state. And you said to me something you thought I thought was fairly striking, saying that you didn't consider like support to be transactional in that way. Right. And I was really thinking through that afterwards, because the YouTube comments from our debate, which I understand that's not you, I don't judge you for that, but overall, like the comments I get from the Free Palestine people are overwhelmingly transphobic. Like, the most transphobic comments I get are not from Republicans, they are from Islamists that believe in this issue. So I guess I wanted to just really ask you a direct question. It's like, why should I, as someone that's really affected by these attitudes, why should I seek to put a group into power that literally has made people like me illegal there, and just as a movement, consistently treats me with a complete lack of humanity? Like, what answer would you have for that?
So you said a few things that I'll
please, let's go through it.
First, yeah, I don't want to conflate Islamists with the pro-Palestine movement, as you just did.
Really? Why?
Because most of the pro-Palestine movement are not Islamists. And
Gaza itself is an Islamist. Like, it operates under Sharia law. Yes.
We're talking about a movement, right? I'm assuming the people that you are getting comments from are not in Gaza. Right, we're talking about the pro-Palestine movement. You're talking about people, for example, who are commenting from our exchange. Those people aren't in Gaza. The pro-Palestinian movement is a global movement, and most of the people who are pro-Palestinian aren't even Muslim, much less Islamists. Mm-hmm. Second, you can be Muslim and not be Islamist.
Yes. Yes.
And so, much of even historic Palestine, and I don't mean historically, I mean like much of the region right now. Most Palestinians are Muslim, but most don't live in Gaza, and most of those people would not identify as Islamists based on all the polls, based on all the data.
Really, you don't think Free Palestine at its core is
an Islamist movement?
I absolutely think that.
What does Islamist mean to you?
This project to conflate Islam with the state and to usher that into a form of government.
So historically, that hasn't been the case, like political Islam. But I don't exactly agree with that definition of it.
You don't think so, really?
No, but again, there are a couple of things happening simultaneously here. And I just want to tease each of them out. The idea, first of all, that the pro-Palestine movement is concentrated in Gaza, to me, is that's just empirically incorrect, right?
I don't think I said that.
No, but what I'm saying is your evidence that the pro-Palestine movement is Islamist is the demographics and political arrangements of Gaza. But I'm saying it's a global movement.
Well, let's go through this. Who is supporting Palestine? It's a bunch of Islamist states over there, correct? Like, it's Iran. It's they're getting.
You consider Lebanon Islamist?
I don't know if I would say that, but I would say many.
You consider Egypt Islamist?
I think that there.
You consider Morocco Islamist?
I think there's fundamentally a Islamist project over there that is fueling this. Yes.
Over where? I'm in the Middle East.
100%. Do you not?
So maybe we're talking about two different things.
Please.
When you said the pro-Palestine movement, you didn't actually mean the pro-Palestine movement. You mean Middle Eastern countries that are supporting Palestine.
No, I'm talking about the whole enchilada of everything from my Twitter mentions to the people like sending rockets over there to launch at Israeli civilians. Every piece of it.
And you think the people in your Twitter mentions are Islamists based on what?
100%. You look at them and the things that they say, it is 100%.
Give me an example of something they say that shows that they're Islamists.
Dude, just go read it. Like, I feel like you're really just
No, I'm really not following. I'm I'm not being pedantic. I'm genuinely trying to understand. Like give me, like I don't I understand the transphobic part of it, and we're in agreement. If somebody's saying something, but I'm saying, why are we assuming that they're Islamists?
Because when I look at their Twitter feeds, it is universally stuff praising Islam, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so
and hold on, Mark. This is important. That if I showed you my DMs right now, the most degrading comments I get are very talking about how Islam is going to judge me and they're going to kill me based on their law and their traditions and all of that. Like, if you read it, it would not be a mystery to you.
I'm not doubting that you get awful things in your DMs. I'm asking you to explain it because I haven't seen them.
Okay.
And this is the first time you're raising this to me. This isn't like we had this conversation before. So everything I'm asking you is genuinely to understand your position.
But I mean, if you look at the protests in downtown Boston, they're saying things like "Death to America." Like, there's a.
And you see that as Islamist chant.
I think that this is part of a zeitgeist that is seeking to overwhelm the West and Western democracy and replace something. And I think gullible people are being sucked into it. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's move past it. We're not going to agree on that.
Well, hold on. No, you don't just get to ask me questions. You got.
What would you like me to do?
Yes.
I'm sorry. What would you like me to do rather than move on? I'm happy to do whatever you want.
Well, I want to ask, like, what is your answer to my question here? Like, why should I support a movement that is showing?
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think we misunderstood. When I said let's move on, I wasn't moving past your question. I was saying let's move past what is defining Islamism. I was trying to move back to your question you were asking.
Fair. Let's do it.
I was saying because we're not going to agree on what Islamism is. That's what I was saying. So let's move on.
Seems like a straightforward dictionary definition, but okay.
It's not, though. As a scholar of Islam, I'm telling you it's not. There are multiple definitions of Islamism, from the belief in the politicization of Islam to the imposition of Sharia law as a state form. There are at least three. I could think of three, and if I thought more, I could probably think of more. But there are at least three different definitions of Islamism. And just to understand, from at least from a scholarly perspective, the Webster's definition of something isn't how we define things. That there are actually.
So let me ask you this, because you asked me a bunch of questions. So Australia.
No, actually, I haven't asked you anything. I'm still trying to answer your first question.
Okay, go ahead. Then I'll ask you a quick question.
I'll answer it. You can ask. You don't have to. You can ask me a million questions, and they can take as long as you want. I just want to answer. I don't want people to think that I'm avoiding your question.
Go ahead.
Your question is, why should you support a movement that doesn't believe in your ... whether it's your humanity, your right to live, your inclusion. I'm just saying, I'm raising a big, I'm casting a big tent so that I'm not avoiding your question in any way. I think that the second piece of what I was resisting in terms of the premise is that I don't presume that most of the Free Palestine movement doesn't support your humanity, your rights. So I'm willing to let me hear me out. I'm still going to answer your question because I think the answer, even if what you're saying is true, my answer would be the same. But I want to stipulate that I don't accept the premise of the question.
Okay.
Right. When I go to JVP protests, I don't think they're challenging your humanity. When I go to Green Party organizing actions, I don't think they're challenging your humanity. When I go to Workers United protests, I don't think they're challenging your humanity. I think that much of the left is very much in agreement at this stage in history, not always, but at this stage in history, that trans rights is a legitimate struggle, just like Palestinian freedom is a legitimate struggle. Are there sectors of the movement that are transphobic? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I have not been to any political movement or organization that does not have significant amounts of transphobia in it. Mm-hmm. Even more so than anti-Semitism, even more so than homophobia, I would argue. I think that transphobia is very, very prominent in lots of places. But my concern with the question, I'm still going to answer it, but my concern with the question, you have to understand, if I say to you, Brianna, explain to me why, if you hate people from Boston, why do you spend so much time there? It's reasonable. You're not just going to get to you're not just going to start answering why you spend time in Boston. You're going to start with making it clear that you don't actually hate people from there. So what I'm doing is I'm challenging the premise of your question. So from your facial expression, one might interpret it as you're reading me as being avoidant or evasive, and I'm not. I'm saying you've made three premises in your question that I don't accept, and so I want to make it clear that I don't accept them and why. before
let's dig down into this. What is the evidence that they don't want to kill me? I mean, you see
then
these
who doesn't want to kill you?
That free Palestine, like you see them marching through the streets.
So this is my answer. I just gave you my answer.
Let me give you a really defined thing.
Okay.
Because they're talking about, when you see this, you've seen these videos coming out of New York, death to America, bring it all down, from the river to the sea, globalize the intifada, all of that. You're talking in all of this. And I want to be clear, I think they'll fail. But I think at the core, it's being driven by people that have an extremist agenda to usher Islam into law all around the world. Now, here's some evidence of this. In Australia, with this entire, the 2 hospital workers that were threatening to kill Jewish people at their hospital. I was looking into this, and are you aware, I think it was 2012, they had an incident down there where Islamists came and set up an informal secondary court system with Sharia law to informally handle disputes. And people in that community would essentially enter this parallel justice system. That is a system that would not end up very well for people like me. So I think that if you're looking at this movement globally, I do think it is anti-democratic at its core. And I think democracy is the thing that has given me my rights. So do you understand how, like, in that framework, how I would be very, very hesitant to engage with that?
Yeah, in that framework, sure. Absolutely. What I'm disagreeing with is the implicit premise or claim that that framework is normative or the template for how people understand Free Palestine writ large. I'm saying that that's not the case. If it were, I would agree with you. But it's not. So again, when you look at the Free Palestine movement, again, it's a movement, in support of the liberation and the self-determination of Palestinian people. You're recharacterizing it as a move to impose Islamic law. The Free Palestine movement is as old as the commitment to imposing the kind of Zionist vision of settling in historic Palestine, right? As long as there have been Zionist movements, there have been Palestinians saying, hey, wait a minute. These movements are happening at the same time. At each of these junctures in history, they were not declaring the goal of an Islamic state. When you look at the resistance movements of the 30s, for example, which is a huge moment, the Great Revolts, 1936 to 1939, what were they asking for? When you look at all of the white papers and the investigations by the British, they all came back with very clear reports about why the fighting was happening. No one has ever said in any of those reports, the Peel Commission, the Shaw Report, none of them have ever said, hey, the goal here is an Islamic state, because that wasn't the goal. And it's fundamentally wrong and ahistorical to suggest that the Free Palestine movement is somehow a secret movement to smuggle in Islamism. One of the most important movements in in Palestinian history is the formation of the PFLP. Are you familiar with the PFLP?
I don't think so. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's one of the most important resistance movements in Palestinian history, right? It was created by who? George Habash, right? You feel free to wiki it. George Habash is Christian. And one of the most important leaders is Christian. Edward Said, one of the most important Palestinian leaders and thinkers in history. Would you agree with that? You've heard of Edward Said, surely. Christian, right? So this idea that the creation of Palestinian liberation movement is a sneaky agenda to impose Islam is not true. Now, you are correct in saying that that Hamas has its roots in the Muslim Brotherhood. They were at one point the Muslim Brotherhood of Palestine, right? Coming out of the Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt. And yes, they have a vision of state formation that is very much tied into Sharia law.
It's not vision. That's the reality today. They will put me to death if they find out you're transgender there. That's just the truth.
Did I say something to counter that?
No. Well, please go ahead.
You almost spoke as if I had said something counter to that. What I was, you said it's not an ambition.
It sound like it's what they wanted to do, and it's what
right, because historically, historically, I was talking about, remember I said, then comes in the Hamas, right?
Sure.
And when they came in, they had an ambition. That's what I said. So,
Okay.
so they come in with this ambition. Now, I don't accept, to be clear, that do you think there are no transgender people in Gaza?
Probably.
There are or there are not?
There probably are, like, closeted.
Why haven't they all been killed?
Haven't all of them been killed?
Haven't any of them been killed? Who are these trans? Where are all these trans people being killed?
The public policy of Hamas is to have the Islamic law, which requires trans people to be the death penalty is absolutely on the table there. It just is, Mark. Let's not pretend it's not.
I'm not pretending anything. I'm asking you, this is an educational space. Just show me, teach me. Where are you getting this from?
I looked this up today. It's 100% true. If
Give
you
it to
want
me.
to look it up after the show, we can do that. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole with you. Of course they would, Mark. Come on. This
Wait a
is
minute.
it's a hardcore Islam. Are you kidding me?
Just so I'm clear.
Are you really claiming that hardcore, you're claiming Hamas would not kill transgender people in the name of Islam? Is this really your claim?
My claim is that there are trans people in Gaza and in the West Bank.
In the West Bank, we're talking about Gaza.
Again, let me finish.
Sure.
There are, because you said Hamas, right? You agree there are members of Hamas in the West Bank, right?
Yeah, but they're not the
right.
entire
So,
government. Yeah.
So there are trans people throughout historic Palestine.
Yes.
We know they're there. I've seen them. I don't know if you've seen them. Have you been to Palestine?
I may in a few weeks. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so no. Okay, so they're there. We know they're there. They're not being killed. There's no. I don't hear any human rights records or any organization saying there's this trend of people being killed for being trans, and you're saying I should just accept that Hamas is going around killing all these trans people. I'm saying, what's the evidence of it? And all you keep saying is, come on.
You're not. Would you agree the official policies, if you're trans there, you can be murdered? We agree on that, yes?
All right, let me say it.
No, just yes or no. Just give it to me.
Let me say it differently. Let me say it differently. Are you, because maybe we're talking past each other. Are you saying, because initially you said trans people, Hamas kills trans people for being trans. And now what I hear you saying is there's a policy that allows for them to be killed. Would it be fair? Would it be more accurate for you to say that while there is that you're making a claim that there's a policy that you have no evidence that trans people are being killed by Hamas? Would that be fair to say?
If we looked into it and did a deep dive, we would find trans people that have been killed.
Okay, have you done that deep dive yet?
Mark, this is silly.
No, it's not silly. You're making an empirical claim, the
issue. Of course, this is the policy. Yeah, Mark, there was a
no, but you just moved the goalpost. Hold on, Brianna. I'm not going to allow you to do that. Hold on. I'm not going to allow you to do
prove that trans people are being killed.
What you said. Listen to me. Just listen to me. What you just said 2 minutes ago was even before this conversation, you've done the research and found the evidence. And now you're saying you haven't done the research.
Was the policy. I found out it was the policy that they could kill. That's
okay.
what I found out. Yes.
So, and what I'm saying is, if you want to have a debate about the policy, which obviously, if there is a policy that explicitly says all trans people must be killed, which I have not seen, but if you say it exists,
I'm saying that's their interpretation of Islam.
Okay, but hear me out. Just allow me to finish the sentence, and then I'll let you respond to it.
Okay.
I want you to at least initially understand that my contention with you was you initially stated that anybody who's trans in Gaza gets killed.
Could be killed.
No, that's not what you said. And when you rewind it,
this is what you do, though. You fog the issue, Mark.
I'm not fogging the issue.
Of course you are.
You're saying you made a claim.
Having a discussion about the policy here, Mark.
We were not.
If
no,
I
okay. Let's. Here's what we'll do.
Yes.
We'll move on. You moved the goalpost from claiming that something.
I did not, Mark. You started obfuscating stuff, buddy. Come on.
No, you started by saying this thing is happening, and then when I asked you for proof of it, you said, "Well, it's a policy," and you were using the policy as evidence that the thing was happening. And I said, "Well, is it possible that the policy is there and it's still not actually happening?" And then you said, "Mark, you started beating the straw man about a policy." And again, I haven't seen the policy. So let me ask you a question. What is the policy you're referring to?
Look, we can keep
going. Is that a fair question? Is that
Mark? I've answered this question. So I want to say
you haven't.
I want to say this to you respectfully. Something you do, because I did research this before then, you tend to really obfuscate and slide things and to go down these rabbit holes, and you ask way more questions than you answer.
Well, I'm an interviewer, but sure.
Yes.
But so, okay, let me just ask one question.
Please.
For clarity.
One more. Go ahead.
On this issue. You say that you have found a transphobic policy in Gaza.
I think it's fairly obvious that's Hamas's policy, is to kill.
And I'm saying, what is the basis? I'm saying, where did you find this? Where is it so that I can find it? That's a fair question.
It is their interpretation. Here's good evidence. So I'm sure you're best friends with what is his name? Dropbox News, the reporter there. They had a story that came out this year that was very anti-Israel, talking about how Israeli intelligence had gone and had identified trans people and gay people and were threatening to out them to Hamas. And that's how they were getting intelligence over there, was by identifying these people, because those gay and trans people believed they would be killed if they were outed. So I think you can go talk to your friends over at Dropbox News and ask them if they think that's a danger.
Okay, so may I respond to that?
Please.
What you just pointed to there was not a policy, but a fear that they, for example, no, listen to me. A trans person will be sexually assaulted in prison exponentially more likely in the United States. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Does that mean that there's a policy that trans people can be sexually assaulted in prison? No, it's a practice. So there, you every time I ask you to answer one, I asked you to show that it happens, and you said, well, here's a policy. I said, well, show me the policy. You said, well, somebody's worried that it's going to happen. These are all three different things. If there is a policy, and I'm not, it's clear you don't know the policy, and that's fine. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Listen to me. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I don't know of this policy. You're saying you do, but I keep asking, what is the where is
policy? Is their interpretation of Islam and Islamist law that they've put in over there. You've got to know that Gaza has a really radical, Hamas has a really radical interpretation of this.
It's just, I don't know. I've spent enough time in Palestine and had these conversations, including with Palestinian LGBTQ organizations like Aswad, like Epos, etc. And I just haven't seen or heard from them even the thing that you're saying without evidence. But just to be clear, because I don't want you to say I'm avoiding your question. I want to get back to answering your question, or would you like to stay here? You pick.
No, go ahead, man.
Where do you want me
to go? I think people are going to watch this and going to think it's nuts to claim that Hamas does not want to kill trans people. I think most people are going to think you're crazy.
Right, but do you see what you just did again? Then I disagree with you about whether trans people were getting killed in Gaza, right? Mm-hmm. What you just said is, I disagree with you about what Hamas wants to do to trans people. I asked you about if there is an actual policy. And when I asked you to show me the policy, you said, people are going to say it's nuts. That you don't. No, let me finish my sentence. My sentence. Brianna, I never once had a dispute with you about what Hamas wants to do to trans people, because I'm not in Hamas's head. I never said that. What I said was that I do not believe, based on the evidence that I've seen or any reports, that trans people are being like widely killed in Gaza. That's what I said. And when then when I asked for evidence, you pointed to a policy. I said, what is the policy? And now that we moved past that policy conversation, you are summing up the conversation by framing it as if I just said to you, Hamas doesn't want to kill trans people. That's what you just said. You said people are going to say you're crazy when they play this back for saying that Hamas doesn't want to kill trans people. I never had, that wasn't even our conversation. We've never had none of this exchange has been about what Hamas wants to do. What I've been disputing is what's actually happening on the ground to trans people, and whether or not there's an actual policy about it.
So let's think through this, though, Mark. Let's think through this. What do you need to be trans?
Can you at least acknowledge, in good faith, can you acknowledge that you misrepresented my position? Can you just acknowledge that?
I think that we're probably talking past each other. I really pride myself in trying to be good.
Do you still think that my contention is that it was about what Hamas wants to do to trans people?
I think I understand your point. And
right. And you understand that I was never saying that now.
It feels like obfuscation, but I
no, I'm saying that's not what we're talking about. You're completely if you so let's move forward then, because if you still think I'm obfuscating rather than just conceding that maybe you just misrepresented my point, then we're just gonna keep talking like this.
Okay.
So
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this one. For you to become trans, what has to happen? What do you need to be a trans woman?
Say that again. I didn't.
What do you need to be a trans woman?
What does it mean to be a trans woman?
What do you need? What do you need from your government to be a trans woman?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think the state gets to determine whether someone's trans.
I think you gotta get some estrogen. You gotta get some anti-androgens. You've got to, like, this is not a healthcare system in Gaza that's going to produce a lot of trans people, right? So the policy that we're talking about here,
I don't agree with that, but I'm not going to argue with a trans person about that.
What I'm saying is there's not going to be a whole. Well,
can I ask a clarifying question about that?
Please, yes.
Are you saying that if someone doesn't get the drugs, they can't identify as trans?
You have gender dysphoria at that point, but you're not trans until you transition. So, right, it's
not for you. I'm asking literally for clarifying. I'm not disputing this.
Sure.
So you're saying that, like, if in this body right now, I identify as a woman, I feel like I'm a woman, mentally I move through the world as a woman, but I do nothing physically to change my physical appearance or or any sort of biological stuff happening through medicine. You're saying I have gender dysphoria. I'm not trans. I'm
saying you're not a transsexual until you transition. Like, these are clinical words. They have actual meanings that are relevant.
Yes, I'm just asking for. I'm just asking for. I literally don't know this. You're teaching me. I'm asking for understanding. So then, would we then?
I'm guessing Gaza does not have gender-affirming clinics where you can go run through the DSM-5 or the ICD-10 protocols and get diagnosed with gender dysphoria and get some HRT. So I think, like, perhaps the policies of Hamas have led to the population of trans people, if that makes sense to you.
No, I mean, yes, I understand the argument. I'm saying I disagree with it, and I will tell you why.
Okay.
Prior to Hamas's rule, these clinics did not exist. You'd agree with that, right?
I would assume so.
Oh, I mean, because your argument only makes sense if when Hamas comes, all that stuff goes away.
We didn't really have gender clinics in 2005, Mark. It's like, this is just like, we're getting into an area where I really know a lot about. Like, we just didn't have gender clinics before. Yeah.
So then, your argument is that because those clinics don't exist. No, I'm trying to understand. I'm not mocking. Yes. I'm really asking. That means what? Just so I'm just so that I can follow.
I'm saying, if your evidence is that trans people are not being rounded up in the streets, I'm saying the lack of healthcare institutions to create trans people is probably a reason there's not a whole lot of trans people in Gaza. But if they did exist...
No, that wasn't my argument. Just to be clear, that's not my argument.
Sure.
That was absolutely not my argument.
Okay.
Just to be clear, that wasn't the argument, right? You're misrepresenting.
I feel like we're going around in circles. And
we're not. I was trying to go somewhere else, but you asked if you could ask me another question, which was how do you make a trans person? What does the state have to do to produce a trans person? Yeah, I agree. I think there are a couple of things I'd say here, right? One, the lack of, how can I explain it? There are two separate things happening here simultaneously, right? Our debate is not about whether or not, as I understand it, is not about whether or not Hamas is supportive of transgender communities.
Mm-hmm.
The debate is whether the pro-Palestinian movement is transphobic.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that there's a conflation happening right now by saying that because this group of people is not welcoming to trans people, that means that the mission of Palestinian liberation is that thing. So for example, there are very few liberation movements that aren't sexist, very few liberation movements that aren't homophobic, very few liberation movements that aren't anti-Black, if not all of them, right? That is a legitimate criticism of these movements. And I'm not disputing that. And I think that's where the straw man comes up sometimes. I'm not making the case to you that Hamas is great on transgender people. I'm making the case to you that one, that's separate from the liberation movement, and two, Hamas does not encapsulate the entirety of the pro-Palestine movement. And it seems odd to me that there's how many people? 2.2 million people in Gaza, give or take, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's not even, forget allies. That's not even the majority or half even of Palestinians in the world or in the region. And so this idea that the behavior of the people who rule that 2.2 million is indicative of the pro-Palestine movement, I don't accept as a premise from the beginning. So even if everything you say about Hamas is true, even if they were the devils incarnate, right?
Which they are.
And I'm not making a case for or against Hamas right now. I'm saying that has nothing to do, that is not the representation of the pro-Palestine movement. That's not the pro-Palestine movement.
So I think this is an interesting road we can go down, because I think we have two ideas here. And I think this is really interesting. We can talk about this in good faith, because I think you see the Free Palestine movement as being fundamentally about liberating, if that's what you want to call it, a certain area, like
liberating Palestine.
Liberating Palestine. I think you think it's constrained to that. This is really interesting, because it's not how I see it. I see Free Palestine as something that is funded externally by the United States, funneling tons of money here, that's fundamentally based in anti-Semitism, that is seeking to undermine Western democracy. And I think very strong evidence of this. I'm sure you saw these students that were.
I just want to make sure I heard you right.
Yes.
The United States is funding a movement to destroy.
No. Foreign. I'm sorry, my voice is quiet. I know. Foreign.
I thought you made a mistake, and I want to make. You said funded by the United States.
Outside of the United States, by the enemies of the United States.
I think you misspoke. That's why I'm correcting you.
Maybe I did. It is very late for me. It's 11 o'clock. I've been up since 4 a.m.
Yeah, it's same for me. I didn't want people later on to hear you misspeak.
Thank you very much.